I perfected this blend just for you, my love. Go on, take a sip." The voice was my husband's, but the tone was all wrong. A cloying, theatrical sweetness that set every nerve in my body on edge. David stood over me, his posture too rigid, his smile a tight, unnatural line on his face. We were seated at his sister Eleanor's sprawling marble breakfast bar, the heart of her pristine Nashville home, where we gathered for our ritual Sunday brunch. Before me, a hand-thrown stoneware mug, a gift from our wedding, steamed with a dark liquid that smelled nothing like coffee. The aroma was acrid and metallic, laced with a subtle, bitter undertone that reminded me of the smell that lingers in a dentist's office after a filling is drilled. It was the scent of deception. My name is Amelia. At 30 years old, I found myself in a waking nightmare, calmly considering the possibility that the man I had vowed to spend my life with was attempting to harm me. This was not a paranoid fantasy born of a single moment. It was a cold, dawning certainty built over 6 months of inexplicable ailments and carefully orchestrated coincidences. There was the severe food poisoning after a celebratory dinner David and Eleanor had cooked, which caused me to miss a critical client negotiation. There was the sudden and severe allergic reaction after using a new face cream Eleanor had insistently dipped at me, which left me bedridden for the day I was supposed to lead a multi-departmental strategy session. David was always there, the doting husband, his voice full of concern as he explained to doctors and colleagues about my delicate constitution. But his eyes, in those unguarded moments when he thought I was asleep or turned away, held a different emotion entirely, a cold, calculating assessment. "You really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble," I said, layering my voice with a gratified warmth I was far from feeling. I wrapped my hands around the mug, the heat a stark contrast to the ice forming in my veins. I brought it to my nose, pretending to savor the bouquet, while my mind catalogued the sinister notes, a hint of solvent, a whisper of something artificially sweet, all masking the fundamental wrongness at its core. From her throne-like chair at the head of the table, Eleanor observed me, her expression of mild, amused interest. She took a delicate sip from her own porcelain cup. "David has been so dedicated," she purred, her voice like smoothed silk. "He's been here every evening this week experimenting with different beans and techniques. He was absolutely determined to create the perfect cup for you to enjoy before your big meeting with the Sterling Global partners tomorrow." The Sterling Global account, the pinnacle of my career, a victory I had wrested from a fiercely competitive shortlist that had included Eleanor's own firm. The final presentation was tomorrow morning. The whispered consultations between David and Eleanor, the furtive texts I glimpsed on his iPad, the way their plans always seemed to culminate in my misfortune, it all coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable truth. This was not just professional jealousy. It was a cold-blooded campaign. I made a show of lifting the mug, the rim hovering just before my lips. I did not let a single drop pass. Instead, I set it down with a soft click and gasped, my eyes widening as I looked at my silent phone. "Oh no, it's the office," I announced, standing up so quickly my napkin fluttered to the floor. "Eleanor, I am so sorry. It's my VP. He only calls on a Sunday if it's a 5-alarm fire. Would you mind terribly if I borrowed your study for 5 minutes? I simply cannot take this with all the noise." A flicker of irritation crossed her perfectly composed face, but she masked it with a tight smile. "By all means. You know where it is. Just please don't touch the manuscript on the desk. It's a first edition." "I'll be the soul of discretion," I promised. As I moved behind her chair, I allowed my body to list slightly, my hip connecting with the solid oak table with a calculated thud. The impact was just sharp enough to jolt the china. "Oh, goodness! I'm so sorry," I cried out, my arms flailing for balance. In the controlled chaos of that moment, my hands performed their desperate ballet. My right hand closed around the handle of Eleanor's delicate porcelain cup, while my left finger nudged my own heavy stoneware mug into its vacant place. It was a breathless, perilous exchange, executed under the very noses of the conspirators. By the time I had righted myself, murmuring apologies, the deed was done. The poison was now in front of its architect. I didn't wait for a response. I hurried into the dim, book-lined study, leaving the door open by a calculated 2 inches. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the doorframe, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I had to see. I had to know. Through the crack, I watched as Eleanor, with a sigh of minor annoyance, reached for the stoneware mug. She took a long, unthinking swallow. David watched her, a smug, almost proud expression that lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then it curdled. His eyes dropped to the mug in her hand, then darted to the empty space in front of my seat. His brow furrowed. In confusion, then his face slackened with the sheer staggering weight of his realization. The color drained from his cheeks. For a full minute, the scene was deceptively calm. Eleanor made a comment about the brunch, and David gave a strangled, monosyllabic reply. Then I saw her hand rise to her throat. "David," she said, her voice suddenly thin and strained, My mouth feels strange, metallic." He was at her side in an instant, his chair screeching against the floor. What? What do you mean?" "What was that in the coffee?" she demanded, her words beginning to slur as if her tongue was too thick for her mouth. She tried to push herself up from the table, but her legs refused to cooperate. She slumped back into the chair, her body starting to tremble. Spittle bathed at the corner of her mouth as she glared up at her brother, her facade of sophisticated composure utterly shattered. "You fool!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, guttural thing. "This was your idiotic plan. You sourced this. You said it was a mild, over-the-counter laxative. You said it was untraceable." Her body convulsed again, a puppet with its strings cut. "You've killed me, you idiot! You've killed me!" The wail of approaching sirens pierced the quiet suburban morning, growing from a distant whine to an urgent scream right outside the door. I stood my ground, a silent sentinel in the ruins of my marriage. The phone in my hand was no longer just a device. It was a weapon, capturing every damning syllable, every gasped accusation. The charade was over. The bitter coffee was cooling in the mug, but the truth was now boiling over, scorching everything in its path.